Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our informative webinar on revolutionizing in-building connectivity by unleashing the power of neutral host networks. My name is Ashish Jain. I'm the founder of Private LTE and 5G.com, an industry publication focused exclusively on the adoption of cellular networks by enterprises. I'm also the CEO of Kairos Pulse, a strategy consulting and technology marketing firm specializing in helping telecom companies, system integrators, and enterprises navigate this dynamic landscape. I'll be your host and moderator for our panel discussion today. I'm excited to see many of you joining us today to tackle a common frustration: unreliable cellular reception. Whether you have dropped calls indoor or struggled with spotty services outdoors, you're not alone. This long-standing issue impacts a large population of individuals and businesses alike. While the industry has made progress, there is often a gap in solutions for the mid-market segment. The good news is there's a promising new approach on the horizon. Over the next hour, our esteemed panel of experts will delve into shared spectrum neutral host networks. They'll share their insights on how this emerging technology can overcome connectivity challenges, explore its benefits and potential drawbacks, and showcase real-world applications across various industries. But before we dig deep, here are a few small logistic announcements. This webinar is being recorded. We don't plan to use any slides. I hope you like that. And lastly, please submit your questions using the Q&A button below. We'll try to answer them as soon as we can. All right, I think we are all set now. Let's begin by having our experts tell us a bit about themselves. John, let's start with you.
Hi, thanks Ashish, and thanks for having myself and Cal Poly on this panel. I'm excited to share our journey with private wireless and more recently neutral host in particular. At Cal Poly, we set up a 5G innovation lab about 2 years ago. And the CIO at the time tapped me to take my experience from the energy industry, where we had been deploying private wireless for decades in our own spectrum, and set up this private wireless lab for learning as well as discovery for the CSU system. The CSU system is the largest in the United States, largest higher education system. It's 23 schools, about 500,000 students. And there's been a unified approach to wireless. And so as private wireless became more accessible in the last 3 years since the introduction of CBRS, we wanted to jump in and understand how we could use this technology to enable the campus. We had a tight partnership with AWS, and you might have remembered they had some private wireless announcements a few years back. And through that relationship we had as a cloud innovation center, the first of a dozen or so around the world, we were able to tap into the partner ecosystem for private wireless. And we stood up an innovation network very quickly, a very simple 5G standalone network 2 years ago, to target agriculture as well as indoor use cases. But very quickly, it was clear that there was a dearth of devices and use cases that you could connect to a 5G standalone network. So after 6 months and learning from that, we went for version 2, and we had this brand new research center being built. It's called the Frost Center for Research. Couple $100 million building. It was going live. Some of it was subterranean. It was meant to be this convergence of many disciplines. You had culinary sciences right next to particle physics. It's a really cool structure, a very cool concept. And that ended up being the place where we said, this is where we need to bring coverage, because you had this brand new shiny building, but you could not get cellular coverage inside of it. It was designed with 2-foot thick walls. Some of it was subterranean, environmental glass, the whole lot. I think a lot of this audience is familiar with that kind of environment, libraries and such. It's common in campuses to have structures like this, where once you go inside, you can forget about cellular signal, and then your Wi-Fi gets overwhelmed. So this was a 4-story building that required 170 wireless access points just to get Wi-Fi through it. So we took that as our next challenge to figure out, okay, what could we do to bring services and coverage into this facility? And with that, we deployed both a 4G and a 5G network within it. The 5G to support the research labs and next generation use cases. And then on the common area where the public comes in and it's subterranean, we wanted to prove out what we could do with neutral host. We'd seen that neutral host had been successful in other countries like South America, and we knew Meta had had success bringing it into their offices. And so with that, we reached out to our partners at T-Mobile, who had been exploring this bring your own coverage model. And with that, we partnered very quickly, came up with a 3 radio solution, went through the process to certify the first floor of Frost. And then along with that, we had an opportunity to also look outdoors in Poly Canyon, where there was about a mile, excuse me, about a mile away from campus, there was a hiking trail. Sorry, I have a disruption behind me. There was a hiking trail that had assaults and injuries, and there was no 911 coverage. And so we worked with T-Mobile to also certify an outdoor site. And with that, we were able to get a 911 service all the way out in Poly Canyon. Excuse me. I have a child trying to get into my room. Thank you. So yeah, that was the killer feature for the university, was getting emergency services out into Poly Canyon, getting coverage to the bottom of Frost, where we had this new building and we didn't have services. So within a span of about 3 months, we were able to go from concept to delivery, light up 911 services, provide T-Mobile coverage inside of our buildings, so that now Cal Poly was in the driver's seat for where we deployed the RAN. We were no longer beholden to DAS, large capital investments in terms of fixed to a carrier, long lead times to deploy. We could very rapidly use commodity components to drop them in to Frost, use x86 servers, use the cloud where it made sense, use simple radios from Airspan and other partners to get this capability out very quickly. And that was a huge success. That was about 18 months ago. And we've since been looking to expand across campus. And so we took that learning, and then that got the attention of Apple. We started to work very closely with Apple in terms of what they were supporting from an iOS perspective. So if you'll notice that iOS has, in the last year, added support for 5G standalone capabilities. So eSIMs, slicing, geofencing. This was really the turning point to say, okay, let's go back to revisit 5G standalone. And so we took that, went to the Cal Poly Pier, which is about 15 miles away. It's a mile off in the ocean. It's an industrial onloading and offloading pier that we use for marine sciences. And so that's where we've kind of gone. We've taken our 5G capabilities, deployed slicing, fixed wireless access out to that pier that was previously on a T1 line. And they only had about 1 megabit to do all of their operations, learning, and classroom activity. So we've taken a very broad approach. We've done a smattering of 4G, we've done 5G, we've done slicing, we've done neutral host to really understand the landscape. But neutral host has really kind of bubbled up as the killer feature. And now we've been layering in AT&T alongside T-Mobile, still partnering and talking to Verizon to see if we can get them to come on board. But the important thing was we got emergency services. So no matter which carrier you have, even in Poly Canyon, if you make that 911 call, you're going to get a response from Cal Poly police and get your needs met. So that was a learning that we're going to take and go to Swanton Ranch, which is 3,200 acres of rural property north of Santa Cruz that Cal Poly owns. It's another outdoor neutral host use case. And then, of course, the library, and there's a whole host of indoor neutral host opportunities for dorms and the like. So that's a real quick overview of where we've been, how we got to where we are. And I think we'll let Lucas share a little bit now, and I gotta go figure out who's banging on the door.
Awesome, John. No, I think there's a lot to uncover. I know you went through a lot of details, and we'll definitely unfold, go deeper into some of the things that you mentioned, especially the things you're doing with Apple. I know what the use cases we've discussed, so they're very exciting, and I'm gonna bring it back when we go through all the introductions. So let's have you, Mehmet, quickly have an introduction, then we'll go deeper into your perspectives on this market, and then we'll give Luke an opportunity quickly to introduce and then we'll go into use cases. So, Mehmet.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashish. Thanks for having me. And I'm so glad to be on this webinar with John and Luca. I am CTO and co-founder of Cellular. Cellular is a vendor, so I'm going to bring a different perspective, maybe slightly different from John and Luca. At Cellular, we provide end-to-end turnkey solutions as a converged 4G, 5G solution designed exclusively for enterprises, right? When I say enterprises, I mean all kind of verticals, industrial, carpeted, and so forth. Our solution is enterprise friendly for management and operations. It integrates with existing enterprise networks, just like a Wi-Fi network. From the services and security perspective, integrating with the switches and firewalls. All of those are designed for enterprises. And our company has been providing private 5G for quite some time in a lot of industrial verticals. And more recently, we started providing neutral host service as a public network cellular offering on top of private 5G service. So that's very exciting for us. We started doing that with T-Mobile. We announced that a few months back. It's fully GA. Today, Luca is going to talk some of the things we have done at their facility here in the US. And then we are in the process of getting the second operator on board. And we are really now focusing in the carpeted enterprise, as I call, right? Healthcare, hospitals, universities, higher ed, retail, and hospitality space, and office space. So this is an exciting era for us because now we can augment private 5G or 5G LAN with the neutral host service, bringing the public cellular to the end customers. So we are very excited in that journey. Very happy to be talking about it today. So with that, I'll maybe let Luca go next.
All right, let's go with you, Luca, now.
Okay, thank you, Ashish. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm Luca Chicchiarelli. I'm a tech enthusiast from 20 plus years of experience in the IT industry. Since 2017, I'm the head of IT at the Conca Group. The Conca Group is a global supplier of fine Italian and porcelain tiles. We have 4 production plants in Italy, actually. One is in a small country inside Italy, actually, that is San Marino. Then we have 2 production plants in Italy and one in US that was talking Mehmet about, that is in Tennessee. We have also in Italy a logistics center. We distribute our products worldwide, and our manufacturing process is an end-to-end production process. We start from the raw materials, so from the clay and the sand, basically, and we go through the firing process with the kiln until we obtain the tile, we stock them, and we ship them. So in what I can say in a few words, basically, in end of 2021, I started looking around a solution to fix all the issues that we had with the legacy Wi-Fi infrastructure that we had in the building since it was established in 2014. Also, another problem that we faced since the establishment was the basically zero cellular coverage inside the building of the plant. So that was another problem that long-standing that we had since the beginning. But I started looking at private cellular first because Wi-Fi, especially for our industrial use case, was really difficult to make it work in the right way. We have roaming devices like AGVs and the forklift that move all around the facility. We have a harsh environment and a lot of structure, a lot of metal, and also that was not efficient at all. So at the end of 2021, I had the opportunity to do a proof of concept with Cellular. We did some testing indoor and outdoor, and for me, that was the turning point. Immediately, I realized that was the solution to fix our problems with the roaming clients. So I decided to go in that way. And in spring 2022, we had the setup up and running. We basically removed all the Wi-Fi in the indoor-outdoor area of the plant, and we kept a Wi-Fi solution only for the meeting room and offices. So that was the beginning. Then at the time we were already aware about neutral host. That was another option that we can put on top of the private cellular that we had configured to solve also our cellular coverage problem that we had in the plant. We at the time we were waiting for a certification process between Cellular and Verizon. I remember we were our carrier for all the employees for our devices was Verizon at the time. So we decided to wait until this certification process was done. So with the hope to be able to activate the solution with Verizon, but we ended up waiting for almost 1 year without any result because the certification was not moving forward. So we decided to switch to T-Mobile, all the carrier, all our devices. And finally, earlier this year, we were able with Cellular to activate neutral host with T-Mobile and also fix all the cellular coverage problem that we had since that time. So that's my story, and we have now up and running a neutral host solution working since almost 2 months.
Awesome. So thanks first of all of you for sharing your backgrounds and journeys. And it's very exciting. And what is very interesting in your story, Luca, is the neutral host made you switch the carrier. So so
Yeah.
that is kind of showing if you don't play nice on this technology, you will end up losing enterprise customers, not just subscribers. So this is if somebody from the carrier community is listening, this is important. Businesses are struggling with their cellular coverage and having people communicate within the buildings. And there is a solution on the horizon that needs to be taken seriously. What is interesting in both of your use cases, Luca and John, is you started your journey with a private cellular network. So you did have some exposure and comfort with the cellular technology in utilizing for your private use. Um, Now, Mehmet, from your perspective, are you seeing that as a pattern in terms of, enterprises first getting more comfortable with a private 5G or private 4G networks and layering on neutral host, or you're seeing neutral host as a beachhead for getting businesses solve their in-building cellular coverage problems first?
Yeah, Ashish, great question. And the answer is we see both. Okay, there are customers like Delcanca, as Luca described, who already started the journey with private LTE or 5G, right? And for them, the neutral host service is an add-on because they already had the business case, the ROI, everything made sense, and they pulled the trigger already a few years ago with the private cellular. Now, public cellular to add on top of it is an add-on, right? Once we have that available, it makes perfect sense to add on. So that is one case, right? The other case is we have customers such as like healthcare and universities. Honestly, the private cellular use case, the ROI wasn't there, right? They had some use cases, but it wasn't fully justifying the ROI for them. Now, the addition of the neutral host for them just suddenly makes the ROI, right? The business case makes sense because now they can not only provide cellular coverage to their workforce or their visitors or students or customers, but also they can have a private network. So for them, mostly in the carpeted enterprise space, right? Again, healthcare, universities, retail, offices. For them, I think neutral host is kind of almost becoming the primary use case, and the private cellular is becoming maybe somewhat secondary, or together, they make the business case. So we see both, basically.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think I'm seeing the same pattern, right? To your point, there are scenarios where it makes sense for private networks to be justify the investment, but a neutral host is finding its way as an immediate solution to solve in-building coverage problems. Now, this is not a new problem. This problem has been there for many years, and a lot of solution existed, including DAS and repeaters and signal boosters, and in many cases even Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi calling alternatives. What is different this time? How is this solution that we're talking about? Let's level set when we say neutral host. What exactly are we talking about? In this solution, and how is this different than other approaches been taken in the market before?
Um,
Mehmet, you want to start, and then we can
yeah,
have
maybe.
John and Luca weigh in on how they felt this is different this time?
Uh, Absolutely. So let me chime in. Basically, indoor cellular coverage is a problem, right? And it has been a problem for quite some time because it's hard to penetrate through the buildings from these outdoor base stations. And the solutions out there so far are primarily based on these distributed antenna systems, DAS, as they call it. And it's basically putting a base station in the basement of a building and then distributing that signal through cables with the remote radio heads to inside the building. So that kind of solution requires a lot of investment to bring the backhaul to the building, to put that signal source or almost like a base station inside the building, and to run separate cabling infrastructure to distribute that RF signal to the radio heads inside the building. So, for stadiums and large venues, maybe airports, that investment made sense. But for many commercial real estate, it was too costly, and it never really justified the investment for those deployments. And the second maybe primary option out there is Wi-Fi calling. So that is where you can use your smartphone to connect to the Wi-Fi network, but you can make voice calls and so forth over Wi-Fi if you don't have good cellular coverage. But that solution is limited with the quality of Wi-Fi. You may be, experiencing interference. The network may be loaded, or sometimes it is not practical for everyone to log into the enterprise Wi-Fi network, right? If it is just customers and visitors coming into a building. And very importantly, as John mentioned, 911 and emergency services becomes a limitation, right? Especially in universities. I'll let John talk about this, but wireless emergency alerts, these Amber alerts, or making an E911 call typically is not possible with Wi-Fi. So those are the existing legacy solutions and their limitations, right? DAS and Wi-Fi. Now, the neutral host solution that we mentioned is essentially having this private LTE or 5G private wireless infrastructure in an enterprise. And it deploys, in our case, like a Wi-Fi solution, right? You have access points that broadcast the cellular signal. And for a private network, we broadcast a certain network ID, right? It's a local private network ID. Only the private SIMs that we provide our customers connect to that network. Like in Luca's case, it may be AGVs or tablets that the enterprise owns. But how about your BYODs, the devices the workforce or the customers bring? They have like T-Mobile SIM cards, AT&T SIM cards, and so forth. So to provide service for those private devices, we broadcast the operator's network ID, so-called PLMN ID. For example, from the same AP, we'll broadcast the private network ID and a operator network ID. Just like a Wi-Fi could have multiple SSIDs, we'll have multiple PLMN IDs. So when you walk in with a T-Mobile phone, it will connect automatically to this network, just like it does base station, right? It's totally seamless. And the traffic associated with those devices are tunneled back to a so-called MOCN gateway, multi-operator core network gateway, through a secure tunnel, and from there they go to the operator's core network. So you have like two branches basically on the back end. One is for private, the other is for public cellular service.
Thanks for explanation, John. You want to weigh in here? What was your excitement about this solution? What made it? I'm sure you probably had DAS before, or you've tried DAS before, or every other possible solutions to solve your connectivity challenges. What piqued your interest in this, and how it was different? And can you explain a little bit more on how it works in your environment? You're on mute right now.
I'll focus on Frost because we actually have a good reference case. There was a DAS originally designed for that new structure, and the price tag for that DAS was going to be almost $1 million. And Mehmet kind of indicated the complexity around that deployment. It's an engineering lift to get a DAS into a building like that. With neutral hosts, we were able to say, you know what, maybe we can save that money and look at alternatives. That was also the impetus for us to start to look at neutral hosts with this new structure. Ballpark estimate, 20 to 40% the cost relative to a DAS, probably even cheaper than that. And also the time to delivery, to take these small cells that you don't need, it looks like a Wi-Fi access point, just run Ethernet or fiber to it, just like you would any other wireless access point. You put commodity x86 servers where you want them, or use the cloud. The simplicity and the familiarity to the rest of your IT staff makes it very rapidly deployable and supportable and cost effective. And so that's what we were able to prove out with the Frost building. We had a reference case for what a DAS was going to look like. It was cost prohibitive. And so that was one side of it. The customer experience is another side of it. And Mehmet indicated kind of that seamless transition. The best interaction for the customer is zero friction, no onboarding. What's your guest Wi-Fi? What's the password? Do I need a SIM? Do I need an eSIM? There's none of that. It just works. And we talked before about what's different now versus, in the past. And it's, customer expectations. Our customers are the students. More and more demand, they expect connectivity everywhere. That's the expectation. Learning is all online and digital. So providing connectivity in the campus wherever they are, also out into the community, is something we want to look at in the future. So being able to not only let the public roam onto our RAN, but also let our students roam into the community through MVNO arrangements in the future is a really compelling opportunity for this kind of seamless mechanism for us as an institution to provide connectivity to the students, to the faculty, for learning, research, and operations, no matter where they are in the community, not just campus, not just the library, but anywhere. And to the point about Wi-Fi calling, you're just putting more traffic in an unlicensed band that's already hypersaturated. So being able to bring something like CBRS to the table, and you now have this lightly licensed spectrum to offload some of that burden on the Wi-Fi, is also very compelling. And then further being able to slice that lightly licensed band so that this slice can go to building operations, this slice could go to the neutral host, and this slice could go over here for private devices that do have SIMs. This is a whole new set of tools and flexibility in configuring wireless connectivity that just didn't exist a few years ago. This is the kind of thing in the industry, in the energy industry, I would have loved to have had, as we were trying to connect remote fields that just didn't have carrier service as well. Here, it's a much more heterogeneous set of challenges and use cases and customers and stakeholders that you need every tool in your box available to kind of put together a cohesive and comprehensive wireless strategy, thinking from the spectrum all the way to the end user devices.
I think Spectrum, I'm glad you mentioned Spectrum here, because Spectrum, in my view, had been one of the challenge in how the solutions were architected in the past, right? So, I mean, we all know each operator, works on a different spectrum frequency bands, and having an infrastructure that connects, that allows users from, different operator subscribers need connectivity to the infrastructure, the radio infrastructure, to support all those bands, to allow all subscribers to connect. And in the past, including DAS and other solutions, it always required support for those multi-frequency bands, right? So how is this neutral host solution, and you mentioned, John, CBRS, solving that problem? Do we still need separate infrastructure for AT&T and separate infrastructure for T-Mobile, and if Verizon comes on board, for them? Or does it really make it a shared infrastructure for all operators using a common spectrum that everybody operates on? Is that something new now with CBRS? Can you throw some light on that?
Yeah, so if we follow the MOCN pattern of the multi-operator communications network, yeah, it's you bring the spectrum, you bring the RAN, and then you split off to the various cores that you want to service. And so that's one pattern. And I think it's a quick, easy win for a lot of use cases on campuses and in businesses and small businesses. I don't think it's going to address our capacity problem. It can address a coverage problem, but there's another half to it, and that's capacity. So for a university, one of our challenges is events like graduation. We're a small community, but when you have 50,000 people come into the town for graduation, every year the carriers become oversaturated and they can't handle that. And so with these types of conversations, I do think we need to look at patterns other than MOCN. There could be more or just more, looking more strategically to small cells and how we deploy them. But MOCN's been a great, easy way and to address the DAS problem, especially indoor. And we've had a couple of years now as the market's matured and there's more players and there's more understanding around how this can work to where it's becoming easier and easier. So it's a great entry point, but it's not the only neutral host solution on the table. To my point about the heterogeneous and we have ranches. We just inherited the Maritime Academy in Vallejo. That was like a port and ships. And so agriculture, there's so many different things at a university that you're trying to address and provide connectivity to. Again, I'll just reiterate, there's no silver bullet. And so we want to be able to tap into all of these capabilities. But neutral host using the MOCN pattern has been proven for the last 18 months or so to be a very quick, effective, and economic solution to getting coverage where it's previously been a pain point.
Great. Luca, you want to share any stories of zero coverage and how your private network has evolved to support your AGVs and forklifts? And one of the questions I see from the audience is, all mobile operators support Wi-Fi calling. How come neutral host is better than Wi-Fi app or Wi-Fi calling? In your case, you said, you had to switch carriers to support this. So can you give yours, more details on your story, why Wi-Fi calling did work for you, and how is neutral host solving your problem now better than Wi-Fi app?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, as I said, for us, neutral host was like the icing on the cake of a private wireless solution, private cellular solution. So we were facing a lot of issues with our previous Wi-Fi infrastructure because this is a pretty big 30 acres area, and there is a lot of metastructure, a lot of moving parts. It's not an easy area to cover with Wi-Fi. We tried with a solution that we have also in Italy that is we are using basically wired antenna with Cisco's IPs to spread the signal and keep it low. This solution was pretty good at the beginning when we deployed it because you can at least keep the number of IPs lower than without using those wired antenna. But the downside is the maintenance that this solution needs, because especially in outdoor where the fluctuation of the temperature, this wired antenna needs a lot of maintenance, are in a very high position, and so the signal degraded over the time, need a lot of maintenance, a lot of cost of maintenance, and the quality of the signal was getting worse and worse. So Wi-Fi calling was okay inside the offices, inside the meeting room, because where that was an easier area to cover. But when you move in the plant, that was not the same thing. So saying that, and also the point that John and Mehmet covered regarding the seamless experience that you had with now with neutral host, because basically there is nothing to do on the client side. You just walk in, you have coverage. You can do 911. That was another good point for us, because we had when we established the plant, just for the dead areas inside the plant, we had to put POTS line just to do safety regulation with 991 and be okay with that. So now we are fully covered everywhere inside the plant. You just walk in and you have public coverage with the T-Mobile. So that's for sure different than Wi-Fi calling, and there is no user interaction. Going back to the private cellular solution, for us, all the client that we had and we still have, like AGVs and forklift, takes a lot of advantage from this infrastructure, because the infrastructure now is much cleaner, is you can imagine that we went from 55 APs to a total now of 8 indoor AP and 4 outdoor to have a full coverage everywhere. So it's a solution that is much easier to maintain. There is no external part. Only the outdoor APs are equipped with sector antennas, but also we decided to keep the AP inside the building and just run the cable with the sector antenna outdoor. Because also during our history with the wired antenna, another big challenge was the thunders and problem with the weather, bad weather. That was very, very difficult to keep make it work, and then we had a lot of maintenance regarding this. With this solution now we have only indoor omni APs, and only we have sector antenna outside the building, and the AP are actually inside. So it's much easier, cleaner, and perfectly integrated with our existing network and firewall and all the VLANs. We kept everything integrated. So for us, that was really the great advantage. But neutral host turned out to be really the final step, that for us is very, very useful now. Also, we have a lot of people that moves from Italy to the US facility. We have the luck that our Italian carrier roams when we are in US to T-Mobile. So basically, we are also covered from the Italian carrier that when you are in US, roam automatically to T-Mobile. So also all the Italian employees that go in the facility are already covered with the neutral host public coverage.
That's a great advantage. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. If you don't mind sharing, how many forklifts and AGVs do you have in your facility?
We have now 14 AGVs and 15 forklifts. They are manned forklifts. They roam inside and outside the warehouse. Yeah, that was one of the main challenge actually to activate the private cellular infrastructure. We also did few months ago, I think, a webinar and a blog post with Mehmet and Selona regarding this specific topic. I described how we make those client devices private cellular enabled, and how we convert them to make them work with the CBRS spectrum, because of course our supplier was not providing any support for that. So we had to find a solution. Find a solution by myself at the end, but that was a challenge, but was turned out to be very easy, and they works perfectly. So we're very happy with what we have achieved.
So how did you solve that problem? Sorry, I missed that. The device which were not CBRS.
Well, actually, AGVs is a little bit tricky because AGV, of course, they got a PLC inside them that got a Wi-Fi module, and also we had to find a solution that was not impacting the AGV network and how they talk with the AGV server. So that is a private server inside the building, of course. So what we did basically is we disabled the Wi-Fi module on the PLC inside the AGV. We connect on the Ethernet port of the PLC a cradle point device, and we did basically a one-to-one net, and the WAN of the cradle point, that is CBRS, is going through the one net to the PLC. And so from a PLC side, that's completely transparent. The same private IP address that was on the Wi-Fi side before was now turned off and put on the WAN of the cradle point. So that was completely transparent at the end for the AGV supplier and AGV perspective. That was the first challenge. The second was the forklift, but that was maybe easier because those forklifts are equipped with an industrial panel PC with the Windows 10 long-term support edition. They basically had a Wi-Fi module with a mini PCI Express slot, what we did, basically, we get rid of that Wi-Fi network interface. We found an adapter that basically is a mini PCI Express to M2 adapter with a SIM adapter as well. So basically, we put that model with the SIM, and on top of that, the a Sierra network adapter compatible with band 48. So that was also pretty clean as a solution to make them work. We put an high gain antenna on top of the forklift. That was
Man,
was
we
at
need to
the end.
standardize this solution for the
Yeah,
industry.
yeah. Why not?
I mean, it is amazing actually what Luca and team has done. And I just shared the link to the previous webinar we had and a link to the blog, Ashish, if you want to share with the
Yeah,
rest of
I
the
will
folks.
circulate that. Definitely.
Because
I think
I think
device
there's a lot of
challenges.
details, yeah, of this that folks may
No,
find
this is
interesting.
number one question I get, Luca, from people. I know this webinar is about neutral host and we're
Yeah,
talking about private network,
sorry.
but this is the
Yeah.
number one question on the list. Like, when are the OT devices getting CBRS enabled? And would love to see what you've done and and have the industry understand like how you can actually solve that problem without really having proper fully CBRS enabled devices coming in the market. And this is really exciting. Um,
Comment on that point. I love Luca's world because it's kind of where I came from in the OT side of things. And one of the things I've been enjoying about the Pier was that it has an OT component. It has a Siemens HMI, it has a water management system. And an example of our role, we had Moxa. We hosted them at the Pier. They were bringing one of their brand new 5G standalone gateways from Taiwan, and they hadn't tested it here on CBRS. And so they came and they were using our network, DIN rail mounted 5G standalone modem. And it was just really great to kind of see those OT vendors starting to get involved, the ground robotics for agriculture. Like that's where there's a ton of opportunity and value, not the massive scale of devices for neutral hosts in some of these conversations we've been having. And that's why the uptake of CBRS in industry, whether it's agriculture with John Deere, they have great stories. Chevron bought a bunch of pals, they're using it in their fields and mines. That's where it's really taking off. And there's more OT devices coming into this space. But yeah, it's still sometimes you got to hack a bit still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I
But it's
think
getting
these
better.
hacks is what will make the things more exciting. We do have a
So
question.
Ashish,
Go
just
ahead, go ahead, Mehmet.
sorry to interrupt. I just want to chime in about one thing. So we talked a lot about industrial and so forth, but we have also a lot of carpeted enterprises, right? And I would like to give another example, which I think highlights a few points. We have a deployment going on right now with a hospital and their clinics. This is a very high-end university hospital in Bay Area. And for them, like that was like very costly, and the capacity was also very limited, as John said. And for Wi-Fi, the other issue, in addition to everything that was mentioned, they had no visibility, right? When people are on Wi-Fi or on DAS, they don't know how many people are connected to this, voice calling or cellular service. So one of the benefits the neutral host service brings is they can have a pretty good idea how many users are connected, what is the data tonnage carried over the network, how many calls are being made, which parts of the network is used for neutral host, right? In addition to the private cellular. So that visibility is also important. And that's like circling back to the original question, like what is different than Wi-Fi calling? So here, a lot of those KPIs are also available at enterprise level, right? Of course, individual devices connecting are protected, right? Like enterprise wouldn't know eSIM and SIM IDs and IMSIs and so forth, but they will know as an aggregate, like during the BZR, how many voice calls were made, how much tonnage was carried over the network for the neutral host service and for the private cellular service.
Yeah, no, I think even I mean, healthcare is an interesting brings another interesting dynamics because a lot of doctors who come in the healthcare facilities are actually not employees, so they are bringing their own device to make the communication. And with the trend of going over telehealth services, Um, a lot of healthcare facilities started to utilize unified communication applications, and instead of regular cellular communications. But people want to talk over cellular. They are not logging into your healthcare portals to schedule calls. They do want to dial in. They still want to call in any case if a doctor is providing a consulting, and they have to move around from floor to floor. That is a big challenge. And I think having a voice is the mission critical app in healthcare. I mean, we talk about a lot of mission critical services from an industrial setting, but in healthcare, voice is that mission critical app. It has to be connected all the time, and relying on Wi-Fi is not always that great. I mean, a lot of data transfer happens all the time, and it can really kick out a telehealth conversation going on if it stays every time on Wi-Fi. So that's definitely a big problem out there, and definitely neutral host seems to be a good fit. Um, I was just looking at numbers, right? I mean, we've talked about the facilities where it makes sense. I mean, there are 133,000 buildings in the U.S. That fall within the range of 100,000 to 500,000 square feet. And I feel that is a sweet spot for a solution like this, because that's a segment of the market which a lot of these sophisticated DaaS-oriented solutions are not suitable for, purely from a cost perspective. And 32,000 educational buildings, nearly 6,000 healthcare buildings. Mehmet, as you pointed out, from a healthcare use case, there are 13,000 lodging buildings and 26,000 office buildings, which goes back to your red carpeted or carpeted environment. So there are a lot of buildings out there that are struggling to get a connectivity like this, and I think there's a big market for this particular opportunity. Now the value is there, the opportunity is quite big. Why are we not seeing that fast of a momentum um, in adoption of something like this? Is there any barrier to entry? Is there an education problem? Is there an awareness problem? How would you weigh in? I mean, I would love to get your perspective from all of you. Like, what is missing for the industry to adopt this at a faster pace?
Maybe if I can jump in, I would say the main barrier right now is the lack of awareness and education, right? I mean, John and Luca are truly trailblazers. They are the early adapters, right, in that technology curve, in that bell curve. So we are really in the early days of this technology for neutral host, right? I mean, private cellular has been around, but the neutral host service just really started last year, I would say, in terms of deployments in different verticals. And I think to spread the word is important, to educate the overall ecosystem is important. And, T-Mobile started as the first, and now AT&T is happening as the second. I think that is really going to help the momentum in terms of getting more and more deployments. And hopefully the third operator will join as well quite soon. So I think we are really kind of in that early adapter phase, and then it will really scale up as we proceed to later this year and next year. That's my take. But I would love to hear John and Luca as well.
Yeah, we commented on this before the webinar, and we live in a different regulatory environment in the United States, and what we're doing isn't exactly technologically novel. It's being done frequently abroad in Europe, South America, and other countries where there's a different regulatory paradigm. And I think our carriers and market forces in the US are starting to drive the adoption of MOCN, not the regulation, but the economics, as I alluded to earlier. And so market forces are starting to kind of kick in. The complexity of the systems is getting simpler. It was a big lift last year, 18 months ago. It was very complex to get this up and running. And it's still a lot of friction in terms of the interaction between the carriers and the venue or the campus to add a radio, to do the surveys. There's still a lot of friction but that can get smoothed out over time. The economics are improving, the complexity is improving. There's room for automation. API enablement's becoming very common with Open Gateway and the telcos becoming more API driven. These are all good signs for a technology that's ready, but yeah, it's still early. But the value's already been demonstrated. And so now I think as an ecosystem coming together in venues like this with the technology partners and the businesses deploying, implementing, and continuing to demonstrate value and share it out like we are today, we'll get there.
So what's the value chain here, right? I mean, in terms of what's in there for operators. I mean, you know, we see all sort of, you know, messages out there in terms of, hey, operators are not investing as much in, you know, the DAS infrastructure themselves, unless, you know, it's a large stadium with 50,000 people coming in. So smaller buildings always suffer from that perspective. Now, if enterprises start to take ownership of this investment, first of all, the question is are enterprises taking ownership of this investment? And is it a major undertaking for an enterprise to do it, or is it still collaborative with an operator to fund some portions of it to make the CBRS neutral host solution possible? And then how does it work between the enterprise and the operator? Is operator sharing the infrastructure, or is getting paid, or operator is paying something? Can you throw some light on the end-to-end value chain and the business model around it?
Yeah.
Do you want to go, Matt?
Yeah, maybe just to share our perspective. I mean, what we have been doing is basically we are a vendor, right? Providing this solution either directly to the end customer enterprise or through our partners, right? To deliver this solution. But in terms of who's getting what, essentially operators are getting more indoor coverage, right? They would like to have more 5-bar coverage in more indoor locations. So that's good for them because ultimately their end customers, the consumers with their SIM cards are getting good service. For the enterprise, it is their workforce, it is their customers, it is their employees, it is the visitors getting great cellular service, and that is value for the enterprise. And the basic model we are seeing is in all the deployments we have made, the enterprise makes the investment, but that is a much lower investment than a DAS kind of investment, right? For a distributed antenna system, maybe they would have to spend X, and the neutral host investment can be, you know, like 30% or 40%, sometimes even lower than that amount that they would have had spent on DAS. And John alluded to that. So for the enterprise perspective, they're getting like 5-bar indoor cellular coverage for their employees, workforce, visitors. It is much more cost effective than DAS. It's much faster because a DAS project may take more than a year easily, and this neutral host deployment can be much faster. Like in the case of Del Canca, with Luca, we were able to turn on neutral host in a few weeks. So it can be a quick process, a much faster process for them. And they have also some visibility, right? In DAS, like enterprise is totally kind of bypassed, right? They don't have any control. They don't have any visibility. All they know is, okay, there is 5-bar, 4-bar coverage. They don't know how many users connect, how much traffic is carried, are there call drops, any issues in the cellular service. They have zero visibility, right? So neutral host brings them the visibility as well. And maybe lastly, I would say they can start small, right? You can start with a few buildings, maybe in a campus, in your university. Maybe there are a few buildings which has really bad coverage. You start with that, then maybe you go to other buildings. You can start with a few floors of a building. But when you do that, usually you have to do the whole building, right? It's a big undertaking and so forth. So that's the other difference, I would say.
So does the cost, there's one question on the from the audience here is, once you've set up a neutral host network, and we've talked about different carriers coming in, does the cost add on for when you're bringing in new carrier, or is it the infrastructure cost doesn't change? It's a matter of just having the operator join and support that.
I mean, in our case, the infrastructure is the same infrastructure. You don't add new radios. It's just a software subscription that you add on. Like every operator is an additional software subscription from the Cellular perspective in our solution. And I mean, there's some more data to carry for us to our Muckin gateway. So there is some cost associated with it, but that additional subscription is really not a big delta in the case of Cellular, in our offering. I can only talk about our solution.
But generally speaking, right, in DaaS solutions and others, you're borrowing a signal source from an operator to distribute further in the building. With the neutral host, is that still required, or you completely out of that? So and from an enterprise perspective, or from a vendor perspective, once you have certified your solution with AT&T or T-Mobile, do you have to do a certification at every deployment that happens, or is it once done for all?
No, the equipment is certified once, okay? And then as you deploy that solution in different facilities, at a university, at a hospital, at a maybe retail, big box retail store, there is an approval process you go to, right? You go through an approval process. The operator looks at the site, like the documentation, and almost all the time it makes sense because there is a problem. Otherwise, the end customer wouldn't be asking and paying for this kind of neutral solution, right? So there's an approval process, but it's quite lightweight, and it needs to also, there is a testing of the E911 and emergency services to make sure all of those work. But that's just few weeks, right? You're not talking about many months, or beyond 1 year for that. We're just talking about a few weeks to ensure all the cellular quality, service quality is there, emergency services are there, wireless emergency broadcasts are there, E911 is working, and then we turn on the service.
Great. I'm going to ask you, both Luca and John, what was your experience going through that process?
I think the certification process has a lot of room for improvement, and I understand the carriers are still also kind of internally getting their systems up to speed. Again, it's still fairly new, but I think this will get simple to where it could be, here's my assurances that the network's meeting all of the 170 checks from each carrier. That can be automated. And also the submission of a new radio should be automated more in terms of, here's my polygon, here's the requirement. Okay, great, we're going to provision and certify. I think there's a lot of opportunity to automate how we bring in new radios to a neutral host environment. It is high touch still, and it's not always a yes. If it's indoor, you'll frequently get a yes, but we're also have a lot of outdoor neutral host requirements because we're talking about rural, we're talking about ag, we're talking about oil and gas, where you're outside, the carriers aren't there, but that's a different kind of conversation. Indoor is pretty simple, but like I mentioned, we have Swanton Ranch, that's going to be an outdoor play. I think we're the only one with an outdoor certified site right now with T-Mobile. The others will join soon, hopefully, but the conversation is still not seamless. There's some friction there that could be smoothed out.
Luca, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I say, as an early adopter, as I said, we had the private cellular infrastructure up and running at early 2022. So everything was tested, was patched, was working fine. So when we had the opportunity to turn on neutral host with T-Mobile, was almost 2 years later. So the solution was really stable, and the activation process, as Mehmet said, was a few weeks. E911 certification, some tests, and software upgrade, and you're up.
Great. We have 2 minutes left, and let me go through some of the questions that people have. One question is, how are the carriers being billed by the building owners? What factors go into that calculation? First of all, are carriers even being billed by the building owners when they have neutral host?
Not in the current model that we are deploying. It's a really simple model. In our deployments, there's no money exchange between the carriers and the end customer.
Got it. Okay.
So this is an area where there's innovation happening on the technology side, and there's innovation that needs to occur on the commercial side. And so for us as Cal Poly, we're not going to be exchanging dollars, but with the CSU, if the CSU can adopt neutral host across 23 campuses, conversations get more interesting in terms of mechanisms. I have this concept of net bandwidth metering How do you exchange flow in and out of your community? I think there's a lot of opportunity in that discussion that we still have to kind of tap into.
Yeah,
The
and John,
internet
we
to
didn't talk
RFP that's
about,
taking place
and I'm saying we
is
didn't even talk about your entire CSU adopting this model yet, and that was a very interesting use case. I wish we had covered that. One more question. For vertical structure with 100 radios, what kind of latency we may see with all three MNOs broadcasting? In short, what kind of issues we may see in machine critical applications or mission critical applications?
I mean, what we do is basically there's different QS profiles that can be used, right? Like in case of Delcanca, for example, their mission critical applications are the highest priority, like QCIs are used for those applications with micro slicing that we implement. So that's how we like ensure that those applications are carried with higher priority than the other traffic, including neutral host. But I'll also let Luca maybe chime in if you wanted to add anything in terms of your experience.
I agree with you, and we actually use micro slicing. That is like a quality of service that Cellular provides in their orchestrator solution. That is a full cloud solution. And that is basically fully integrated with our VLAN infrastructure. But even that, for example, at the moment, we are giving priority to the AGV and forklift traffic instead, for example, of push-to-talk radios that also are used in the CBRS solution, but for us are not so important AGVs. So actually, we can work with this, and at the moment, we don't have any kind of performance issue with the solution that we have in place.
Got it. I think we are already past our time. I just have one more question we'll take, which is how do AI cameras play into neutral host network, or do they at all? Do AI cameras play into neutral host network?
neutral host, not so much.
Not so much.
But private 5G,
I would
absolutely,
think more of the
because
private network scenario there, right?
private networks, yes. And I think cameras are one of the biggest use cases out there, and AI enablement of them is already a natural fit. And then sure, you could follow that thread along to putting your edge compute closer to your agriculture field. So you're doing your inference and your robotic controls closer to the factory floor. So
right.
in that context, yes, but not so much neutral host.
Well, I think we're past our time here, and thank you everyone for sharing great insights. I know there is very hard to draw a line between a private network and a neutral host sometimes, considering they both provide some level of cellular coverage within the building. But I think there is exciting times where both of these technologies are solving the connectivity challenge for enterprise, and whether it's for private use or solving a public coverage. The technology is there and it is getting matured, and it's getting resolved, to John's point, as as more and more enterprises like yourself are implementing it, and vendors like Cellular are maturing the products. So thank you once again, everybody, for sharing your insights, and everybody for joining the webinar today. Thank you, everybody.